But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country. And then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society.
So recent remarks made by Vice President J.D. Vance regarding the classical notion of the Ordo Amoris, or the right ordering of our loves, has stirred up a significant debate in both political and theological spheres. Now, if you don't know, the Ordo Amoris is a philosophical and theological concept rooted in the teachings of Plato and Aristotle, as well as St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas. And what it does is it proposes a hierarchical structure to our loves, prioritizing love for God first and foremost, followed by family and community, and then humanity at large. Now, J.D. Vance's interpretation of the Ordo Amoris contends that one should prioritize family, neighbor, and community before extending love to the global sphere, a stance that has sparked intense discussions nationwide and beyond, especially in light of our flirtation with globalization over the last few decades. Critics of Vance's interpretation believe that his use of Ordo Amoris lacks a Christian sense of compassion and charity and distorts the Christian message of universal love. In contrast, supporters posit that Vance is rightly advocating for a revival of traditional values here at home, arguing that responsibilities towards family and community, particularly the protection of our families and communities, should come before the more global concerns of those outside our borders. The theological ramifications of this are substantial, suggesting that the valuation of love might need reevaluation in both social and political contexts. Joining us today to delve deeper into these complex issues is Rod Martin. Rod is the founder and CEO of Martin Capital. He's a technology entrepreneur, investor, and futurist, and he's famous for his involvement with the founding of PayPal. And he's involved in countless charities, political, educational, and theological institutions. You'll definitely want to check out Rod's awesome Substack, rodmartin.org, and his awesome X account, Rod D. Martin. We've got the links to both down below. Rod, my friend, welcome. Great to have you here with us today.
Wonderful. Good to be here.
Well, it's awesome to have you. I understand you recently wrote on J.D. Vance's comments on the Ordo Amoris, so I'm excited to get your thoughts here. I mean, first off, Rod, did you ever imagine in your wildest dreams we'd have a vice president in our lifetimes, especially over the last 4 years, talking about the Ordo Amoris? I mean, is that not itself a symbol of the golden age?
It's fantastic. It really is. And it's the kind of discussion we need to be having, because we have just imbibed so deeply of the leftist worldview for the last 80 years. We don't even realize how suffused we are and everything is with it. And these things have to be re-questioned. They apply to everything. They certainly apply to the immigration crisis, but they apply to countless other issues like the war in Ukraine and what are our duties in Syria, if any, and so forth. And of course, the most fundamental aspect of this is just the most basic. It's that we can love everybody while still loving some people more. I mean, we're expressly commanded to love God more. We're also expressly told that as a man in particular, if I don't provide for my own family, I've denied the faith and am worse than an unbeliever. Well, by definition, I can't provide for everybody's family in the same way as my own. So God has given me a prioritization, and that's just inherent in Scripture. So the idea that we aren't supposed to, likewise, a little further out, care about our community, a little further out, care about our nation, ultimately care about the world. The idea that this isn't not only natural, but scriptural is just absurd. And it has been harnessed by In some cases, the weak-minded just trying to be compassionate, but in many cases by malicious forces seeking to make Christianity foolhardy to anybody who pays attention to it, and empty it of any ability to carry out its mission.
That was brilliantly put. I've noticed too, Pope Francis never seems to have a critical word to people who hate their country, who despise their nation. Have you noticed that? I mean, just the level of vitriol towards Western civilization and Western culture and so forth. Not a whit. Don't have a word to say that. Somebody turns around and says, we really should love our country and maybe even prioritize that love over the love of somebody, to the south of our border. All of a sudden, they committed, literally a cardinal sin, as it were. For those who are not quite familiar with the discussion, both pagan philosophers as well as biblical faith, we're called to rightly order our loves. I think you explained that beautifully. Can you give us a sense of how that concept interacts today with, say, modern Christian ethics? Because I think I'm getting the sense where you're going, that our modern Christian ethics have been radically secularized and liberalized. How would that concept interact with modern Christian ethics, and especially in relation to issues like immigration?
Well, how could we not be completely marinated in worldly thought at this point? We send our kids to public schools, for heaven's sake, which were already bad when I was a public school student. And of course, I didn't send my kids to public school for the very good reason that they were already bad when I was there. But now they're just indoctrination camps. So, it's like Vodi Bakum says, you can't very well send your kids off, come back Romans. It's just how things are going to work. So in the current situation, we have really a Christianity that has forgotten its own lessons. You will frequently hear the evangelical left talk about immigration in terms of the Good Samaritan, for instance. But the lesson of the Good Samaritan isn't that the Samaritan went to India or China or Africa to find people to help. The lesson of the Good Samaritan is that the person proximate to you deserves your help, even if it's someone you don't get along with. Right. And actually, this is an Old Testament concept too. I was just reading in Deuteronomy this morning about the requirement that if your enemy's donkey disappears and you come across him, you need to return the donkey to your enemy. So this is from Genesis to Revelation. We have a duty to those proximate, and if those proximate happen to be in a foreign country somewhere, so be it. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But I have more of a duty to the person who lives next door, whose house catches fire, and I've got a garden hose, and we can shoot it at the fire. I've got more of a duty to my countrymen who don't need to be drawn into a nuclear conflict with Vladimir Putin just for some nebulous reason. Some commentator decides, oh, well, this is the right thing to do. No, we actually should analyze that and see if that's in the interests of the people that we are required to represent.
And it's so fascinating because you brought up your kids, and I was in the classical school movement for 20 years. Yeah. And of course, one of our favorite terms there is paideia, Paul's commendation to fathers to raise their in Ephesians 6 to raise their children, and the paideia to Kyriou, and the paideia of the Lord. And it's just really interesting because I love this. I love that passage because it just brings this all together, right? So we love God, we love our family, our wives and our children, and like you said, we if you don't provide for them, you're worse than an infidel. And then what are we supposed to do with our kids? We're supposed to raise them in the paideia of the Lord. And paideia is the Greek equivalent to the Latin cultura, which is a culture, a distinctively Christian culture, a paideia of the Lord. So we evangelize not despite our cultures, but through the transformation of those cultures in a distinctly Christian paideia. So it just seems like it's all there.
Yeah, it is.
To me, it's almost like, guys, I mean, do you understand? Are you reading your scriptures right? It's all there. Your obligation is to God, then family, and then culture, and then you draw out. And the more cultures you transform, the more of a Christian civilization you awaken.
We're to disciple the nations, and that doesn't just mean go and preach the gospel to them. You know that in your youth group, for heaven's sake. You don't just get them saved and get them dunked, for heaven's sake. You got to disciple them. You got to teach them what the Christian faith is and how to live it out. And if you do that to enough people in a discrete geography, they will start governing themselves differently. They will run their businesses differently. Everything gets better the more conformed more people are to the likeness of Christ. But back to just this issue of ordered loves, specifically with regard to New Testament teaching, we have another great example in Paul's teaching regarding widows. He says that widows under the age of 60 are not to be supported by the church. They should go get remarried, or they should be supported by their families, or whatever. Well, wait, that expressly means that my family is not supposed to take care of your 50-year-old widow. You're supposed to take care of your family's 50-year-old widow, or she's supposed to be remarried. So those things being true, Paul is giving us an order in this, and it doesn't mean that we don't love your 50-year-old widow in your family.
Of course not.
It just means I don't have a duty to her because I have a duty to mine. And then if she goes over to the age of 60, Paul says the church should take care of them, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But God gets to define it. Some liberal on Face the Nation doesn't.
Deface the nation in light of the anniversary of Russia's passing yesterday. That's right. Deface the nation. Right? Now, I think we mentioned here the discipling of the nations. I think critics of Vance are actually showing their cards a bit here, because the critics are arguing that Vance's interpretation of Ordo Amoris promotes Christian nationalism. And obviously we can't have that. Right? That's off the table. Goodness. We're not even allowed to think that way. What do you think's behind that criticism? And do you concur, when all's said and done, that Vance's understanding of the Ordo Amoris is a faithful representation of a national theology, as it were?
Well, if Vance were going to have any such leanings, it would probably be integralism, because he's a Catholic. I'm a Southern Baptist. I'm looking at the whole world differently from J.D. Vance, though not at all on this. On this, I think he's exactly right, as the church has historically been right. But the charge of Christian nationalism just means we don't like you. And, that's the current terminology. Before we were white supremacists. Before that, we were fundies. It's the epithet of the day. We do have some Christians who picked up the Christian nationalist banner. Some of them very deliberately and with, they've thought it out. They have a theory of the case. A lot of them are treating it kind of like deplorables and irredeemables and garbage. You're going to call us this? We'll call us this. We'll just take it over. The bottom line is everybody would be a Christian nationalist by the definition of the Democrats 50 years ago or 100. Right. This is a country founded by Christians. Virtually all of the founding fathers were Christians. They're coming straight out of the First Great Awakening. That's their background. If you read the Declaration of Independence, it's very clearly a litany by the lesser magistrates of the sins of the higher magistrate, King George, and his parliament, which is not representative of the American colonies in London. And they're going out of their way to pay attention to Lex Rex, Samuel Rutherford. But we still have duties as Christians. And so you see all through American history, this great emphasis on the Christian faith. this is a mostly Christian people and always has been. And to hear the left talk, all of that is not just impermissible failure to separate church and state. It's basically the Ayatollah's Iran. And nobody, surely nobody honest with an IQ above 80 would believe such foolishness. It's just goofy. It's propaganda.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I've heard it put, a number of scholars have pointed out, when all's said and done, liberalism's just secularized Christianity, and then wokeness is just a, like you said, kind of a Wahhabi version of fundamentalist liberalism.
Or to come in a little bit different direction, wokeness, or which is critical theory based cultural Marxism, is really just a marketing scam. Starting with Gramsci and then developed by the Frankfurt School and lots of moderns like Kendi and Tisby, and D'Angelo. These guys just couldn't sell classical class warfare to an American audience, because everybody in America thinks their kids are going to be richer than they are. And everybody wants that. Nobody is all that covetous compared to the rest of the world. So there's not this huge evil eye of envy problem that you have on much of the planet. People actually cheer for each other when they succeed. It's not perfect, but it's much better than anywhere else. And I've been all over the world. It's absolutely true. And Vance was alluding to that point with regard to Europe. So you had to come at it a different way. Wokeness is the different way. It's a marketing scam to get you to buy Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin and Mao Zedong, but do it in a roundabout way that isn't obvious.
Right. And have a sense of moral superiority in doing it as well.
Oh yeah.
What do you think? With so many evangelicals and Catholics, just not quite even the head Catholic, not quite understanding or being so critical of Vance, what do you think that says about the current state of Christianity in America? And the very fact that he's bringing this up, do you think we're witnessing a shift in how theology can really begin to inform public policy?
Well, the bad news is that our faith has been really dumbed down over the last several decades. It's been really disheartening to watch. People get their theology more from precious moments than from Paul. It's just absurd. And so they're easily manipulated by anybody like, say, Russell Moore, who just knows how to demagogue the room. And I'm sorry, but those guys speak with forked tongue. We just saw that in an indirect way, their after party curriculum to teach your church to be a bunch of Democrats, was funded indirectly, but funded by USAID and through a nonprofit run by a prominent never Trumper. And, they can't claim to be in the after party mess. So, these guys are operatives, and that is a terrible, terrible thing for the church that, oh, wait, here's the good news. The church didn't pay a lot of attention to, not in 2016, not in 2020, not in 2024. They're like, okay, you're nice. You speak well. I like to hear your preaching. Now go away. And that's good, because they have a core understanding of what Scripture demands of them that goes beyond their formal teaching. I've said a lot of times that in public schools, our only saving grace is that children don't listen. And I think sometimes that's true in the church too. So anyway, there's this huge opening. I'm sure you've seen that more Gen Z men are going to church now than Gen Z women. That's an earthquake if that continues. That'll be the first time in 300 years something like that has happened. And if men will lead, and if they'll lead their families, people will come back to the faith. I think we're due for a new Great Awakening. I believe the seeds of that exist. I believe America's best days are ahead.
So awesome. Gang, this is just a slice of what Rod has to offer in terms of his daily analysis. So make sure to check out Rod's Substack and X Profiles, which are linked below. He's truly an incredible and very influential thinker, and you don't want to miss out on seeing his latest insights each and every day. I love your X account, by the way, Rod. I read it every day. I love your threads. It was great to have you, man, on the show. Let's have you back soon. We're an exciting time. What can I say? It's the golden age, man. This is impressive stuff. So come back anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you.